Good afternoon. Buenos dias. My name is Ira Grouper. I have the honor of chairing this panel today on union organizing / community organizing. Just by way of identification, I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I was a union shop steward for 21 years. Out of the 24 years I worked in a factory, I was a union organizer, hospitals and warehouses, etc. I sat on the Greater Louisville Central Labor Council for 8 years, and I have written for a number of years a newspaper column on the labor movement called Labor Pains, P-A-E-A-N-S. Okay, can you hear me now? Sorry, I usually don't get accused of not speaking loud enough. Okay, my name is Ira Grouper, and I've been involved in the labor movement for many years. And as far as the civil rights movement, I worked in Georgia with SNCC and in Mississippi with COFO, Council of Federated Organizations, and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. If anybody has trouble hearing me, don't just raise your hand, say speak louder, because I don't see too well. Okay. We have a very distinguished panel today. Before we start, though, I just want to say, by way of introduction, the issue of union organizing and community organizing and the melding of the two is of extreme importance to the labor movement today. The labor movement has made some important changes in the last 6 months or a year for the good. However, the labor movement has been hemorrhaging workers for many years. We are a carcass, in my opinion. Not only that, but the labor movement did not always adequately deal with the issue of race. It did not always deal with the situation relative to sex, age, disability, sexual orientation. It didn't deal adequately all the time with the business of good old boys running unions. There's now a change, it seems, we hope, please God. And our distinguished panel will speak to some of these issues. We've all been in touch by email, and each panelist will speak for between, up to 10 minutes, and I will let each panelist, or less, and I'll let each panelist know when there's 2 minutes left. Then I will open the floor to the panelists to respond to each other if they so wish. Then we open the floor to discussion. The only thing that we ask of you is that you can make a statement. You don't just have to ask a question, but keep it short, no longer than 3 minutes. And if I cut your ass off, you'll understand why. Nobody's accused me of nuance and subtlety. I can show you references to that effect. Okay. My first distinguished guest is Ms. Sarah White. Ms. White is a former organizer for the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 1529 in Mississippi. She has been involved in the struggle for a long time. Ms. White.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here at this moment, to be a part of the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer. And when Freedom Summer was taking place, I was very young and didn't know a lot about it. And through the struggle that I've gone through now, and looking back on the struggle we had in the plant that I came out of, you know, I understand the urgency of continuing to fight and change things, you know, throughout this world. I guess I wanted to kind of, for those who don't know what happened with me, I wanted to go back and kind of describe in my phase of life what Mississippi was all about and how we as catfish workers encountered some of our struggles and how it affected us back in the catfish industry. And in order to do that, I kind of have to go back and tell you a little bit about catfish workers. The catfish industry started back in 1981. And it started because you had white farmers who had started to lose money in the cotton industry and was trying to design ways to start back profiting and making money. So we had about 178 white farmers who came up with this idea about growing catfish. And I know a lot of you have eaten catfish and it's really good, but it was women who processed the catfish. They built ponds. As some of you travel around in the area, you can see the ponds out where they dug holes and built these ponds, and they got women to process the catfish. And when this plant first started, it was only 40 workers who worked in this facility. And after 40 workers grew to 1,200 women who worked in this catfish plant. 90% of those women was African American single parent mothers. But to just go back a little bit to the first history of it, you know, they brought us into it started in 1981, and I started to work for Delta Pride in 83. And through that ordeal, you know, we was harassed, mistreated, we was timed daily, they had the line speeding, we were sexually harassed, forbidden to go to doctors. They only would give us an aspirin, to take an aspirin when we had arm pains from the carpal tunnel that spread the plant. And this particular day, you know, I had only been there a year at the time, and a friend girl of mine's got this authorization card. That's how it really started. She got this authorization card, and she said, well, Sarah, she said, it is so much stuff going on in this facility. She said, we're gonna have to do something different. She said, we're being fired, we're being harassed and mistreated, and the bathroom doors didn't have the stalls to cover the women. So when the women went into the bathroom, it was always another woman who had to stand in front for that privacy. So it was a lot of issues going on at that time. And my friend girl said, hey, it's something we gotta do, you know. She said, and she eased out this authorization card, only the tip of it. And she said, Sarah, she said, I got this authorization card. And she said, this authorization card can give us a union. I said, what? Which I knew what a union was, but I wanted her to repeat it. She said, this card can give us a union. I said, a union? She said, Sarah, she said, we gotta do something different. She said, we got to organize, we gotta get a union. She said, the steel plant got a union. She said, I know if you help me, we can get the union. And she asked me once again, I said, Mary, you gonna get our ass fired. And she said, no, Sarah, we can do this. So we started our venture out to organize the union, the International Union, United Food and Commercial Workers, came in and told us what we had to do to get their facility organized. We had to get a percentage of authorization cards. So we started on our bout throughout the journey of getting these authorization cards finished up and signed up so we could get the labor board to come in and establish an election for the union. But it was in the cold of 1985 winter, so we had to knock on doors and go into the communities, go into the stores, and try to get these authorization cards signed. And eventually in 1986, we did get the union. We did organize Delta Pride Catfish, one of the largest catfish industry in the world. It was about 1,200 workers that worked in that facility. We organized, and we got victory through that organizing that plant. But you see, these 178 white farmers weren't used to people coming in, running this show, telling them what they could do, you know, when to go on break, or talking about the increases as far as the benefits. They weren't used to people coming in and telling them when they had to give raises, when they allow us to go to the bathroom, because see, we just couldn't walk off the line and let them know we had to go to the bathroom. We had to get in line and take turns to go to the bathroom. In our contract language, we even negotiated language that said that the women in that facility had the right to have bathroom rights, and that is just crazy. That's crazy because all of us in the audience know that you can't contain and control the bathroom. So we had to put that in law to enable us to go in the bathroom. So we started on with the unionization and organizing. We was victorious and we got the union, but we still had a problem with this company because that was in the South is usually in those plants, their way or no way. You know, workers are struggling over and over to try to change that atmosphere in that plant by organizing. So they, when it was time for us to negotiate another contract, they didn't want to talk to us. They wanted to give us the 3 cents. They wanted to take off the bathroom rights. They even had it in the negotiation package. We want to remove the bathroom rights and let the workers go to the bathroom at 12 o'clock lunch hour. So we jumped to the streets and went on strike in 1990. And we're here to talk about community organizing and unionizing. We use the community to organize around that struggle. We started to bring our ministers in. We started to bring, you know, NAACP and other organizing, Mississippi Workers Center for Human Rights. And at the time, we brought these organizations in to try to introduce people to us as how we were struggling to try to overcome our struggle. And they embraced us, and we were victorious in that strike. And we got a better contract, job security. We got benefits. We even got a pension at that run through the contract. So we made that facility better for the workers in the Mississippi Delta. And today, through the Worker Center and United Food and Commercial Workers, we continue to build and organize workers to try to organize and make the facility a better place to work and the community better. And if you got any questions, we'll do it later on, but I've been given 2 minutes on that.
Thank you very much, Sister White. Our next speaker is Sanjioni Butler. Ms. Butler is with the United Auto Workers, Canton, Mississippi, longtime labor activist.
I guess it would be befitting for me to go behind Ms. White. So again, want to thank the committee who invited me to be a part of this panel. And, you know, my hat's off to Sister Sarah White in her struggle, and her co-workers. They went through a long journey, 81 through 86. So I'm glad to know that they were victorious. So what that tells me is workers in Mississippi, if they stand together, they can do it. Mississippi has such a long history and legacy of mistreating people of color. But workers at the Catfish Factory stood together and they overcame their circumstances and were able to organize. The fight that I want to talk about is the fight that workers are enduring at the Nissan Canton factory. So as I was sitting here listening to some of the issues that you guys face, Ms. White, in 2014, I mean, the workers are still facing some of those same issues. You know, a lot of people think workers want to organize because it's all about the money. It is not about the money. She worked in a catfish manufacturing. This is a car manufacturing shop. There are many injuries. The same issue as far as the line being sped up and people are not being allowed to rotate. They were promised 2 and 3 job rotations, but workers are working on that same job for 8 to 10 hours. There's a lot of injuries that is starting to take place on workers' bodies. If you're doing this, it's hard to move around and move from department to department. Most of these people have been working in the same department and work area for the last 10 to 11 years. The factory first came online in 2003, and a year out, they called the union and said, something's not right here. We need some type of help, some type of representation. But because people are afraid, we're still fighting and trying to educate people one by one so that they can organize and form their union. But a couple of things I want to point out is Nissan is a multi-global company, and I think that labor has to start looking at themselves as a multi-global international. We got to start looking at ourselves the way companies look at themselves, and start organizing on an international level. And some of the things that the UAW is doing different is we've been going abroad and talking to other labor unions in France, South Africa, Brazil, and we've been able to share the Nissan worker story. And at the end of the day, everybody has the same story, but the thing that's different is Nissan has unionized factories in these countries, but they won't allow the workers here in the U.S. at their Smyrna plant and their Canton plant the right to a free and fair union election. They're telling them that we don't do business with unionized shops, but in their home state, which is their home country, Japan, they have a union. So trying to share that with workers and getting that information to workers has been difficult, but we're reaching each worker. Every worker we talk to, they're able to share it with the next worker. But again, it's just a long process. So again, as I kind of want to talk a bit about exploitation. Nissan has a history of exploiting workers. A couple of things that resonate and stand out with me is the state of Mississippi gave Nissan millions of dollars in tax abatements and incentives to bring the factory here. And one of the things that people probably don't know is the state gave Nissan money to train their workforce. Well, as you went through this long process of trying to get selected to get this job, people came from 50 counties. Out of 52 counties, workers have been picked from 50 counties, and they drove for 6 weeks not getting paid, and they were in a training program that they didn't even know that if they were selected for the job. They had to go through the whole 6 weeks before they knew if they were selected. No pay, driving an hour and a half, 2 hours each way back and forth, carloads of people. So that's a form of exploitation. And one of the other things that they did, as Ms. Sarah was talking about as far as the restrooms, when they first came online, they were denying workers the right to go to the restroom. Workers were having to wear Depend diapers. These are grown people who were having to wear Depends because they were not allowed to release their bodily fluids. These are things that the community must know. Nissan has this thing about going in. They're global. They're a multinational company. They have the money to throw around in these communities and buy off the churches and make it look good with 501c3 organizations to paint a picture that they're great corporate citizens. But there's a story behind the picture that they're portraying. And so one of the things that the UAW has been working on is building the community piece of the stories that need to be told. We've been talking to a lot of pastors some of them are small churches. These are churches where these people, the workers, go and they worship. So we're talking to pastors and getting them engaged, and we are bringing and having small group meetings in the churches so workers can tell their own stories of what they face on a day-to-day basis. And the pastors are really buying into the stories, and they're really figuring out a way on how they can engage the congregation and some of the other pastors to get involved in this movement to show that there is a bigger component than just this company just coming in here bringing jobs. It's some serious underlying issues here that we've got to expose. So we're working with other community coalitions. We understand that we've got to educate the communities in which workers live. If workers are happy and doing well and being prosperous on their jobs, it spills over and affects the community in a great way. Workers, if they're making fair wages and they're healthy, they're going to spend more. They're able to send their kids to private school. they're able to buy homes and go shopping and things like that. So again, even though I'm kind of talking about them having a better life financially, the workers that we've been talking to have been sharing their stories about how they're being treated in the workspace and the unsafe working conditions that they face on a day-to-day basis. So I think we'll have more dialogue as time goes on, right?
Voltaire once said, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. I thank Sister for writing the shorter letter. Okay, somebody wants to know the process for asking questions. Each speaker is going to be speaking for a certain amount of time. Then I'm going to throw it open to this panelist to comment on what each of them has. Then we throw it open to the audience for questions. Okay? Sure, thank you. Our next speaker is from an organization called MIRA, which is an organization dealing with immigrants. When I lived in Mississippi, there were very, very few Latinos and other minorities, except for African Americans. That has changed appreciably, qualitatively. La lucha contra la discriminación y por la justicia para los inmigrantes está muy importante por el movimiento de trabajadores. Es una cambia, a changed circumstance. The movement for justice for immigrants involves much more than simply fighting for better wages and hours and working conditions because of the material conditions, the special conditions. I am very pleased to introduce the director of MIRA in Jackson, Mississippi, Bill Chandler.
Thank you, Armin. I actually began my work not in Mississippi, but in California. When I was a teenager, I was on my own at the age of 16 and worked with a lot of minimum wage jobs, including oftentimes going into the Central Valley in California. In the Central Valley in California to do some farm work. In 1960, I got a job in the Los Angeles County Hospital, the LA County USC Medical Center, as it's known now. And I accidentally walked into a meeting at my church of an organization called the Community Service Organization. Almost simultaneously, I got involved in the union. I got on a night shift. I worked in the blood lab, and I had the opportunity to run around all the wards in the hospital and collect specimens from the patients. That hospital had 4,000 beds and 10,000 workers. And when I went to work there, they had already started an organizing campaign that began in the 1950s in a union that was called the United Public Workers, and it became a part of what became the Service Employees Union eventually. It took them about 20 years to build the union there to get recognition from the Los Angeles County. But I was there for 5 years, and we had a lot of issues there. If you can imagine, in a hospital, we were serving patients and providing health care that we really could not obtain ourselves. And I worked in the blood lab, and we worked with all kinds of body fluids, and everybody in the lab eventually ended up with hepatitis because we'd have needle sticks, and we would have to set up the specimens, and it would mean using a pipette, going down into the test tube, actually sucking up the serum or the whatever, the bodily fluid, any kind of bodily fluid you can think of, and then putting it in the little cups to run on the machines. So people got sick a lot, and the wages there actually were less than the minimum wage at that time. And so the union organized, and it's actually a black woman that approached me about a month after I was there, a woman named Blanche Sessions, who Bill may know from SEIU. She passed a long time ago, but she was one of the leaders of the union, and she got me involved, and so I went on the floors and signed them up. In the meantime, the Community Service Organization was doing voter registration in a time when even in California it was difficult to register people of color because you had to be deputized by the registrar of voters at LA County, and basically they had white deputy registrars, and there had been a big fight among in the community to get African American and Chicano voter registrars, but you had to physically register people. You couldn't do a mail-in voter registration card. So we had a process that I learned about speeding up the process to organize and register voters. So those two things started to come together because workers at the hospital, some of them lived in the neighborhood where we were working to register. And so in 1960, it ended up with Kennedy being elected president. But what happened after that, we began paying attention to what was going on in other places. And we had heard about the murder of Emmett Till here in Mississippi because the mother of one of my friends in our neighborhood got us a copy of the Jet magazine and showed us a picture of Emmett Till's body and said, this is why we came to California from Mississippi. And they did it by way of Kansas. They ended up, Kansas was just as bad as Mississippi, and they came to California. And then we heard about Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. We began following it in a radical newspaper that was distributed in our neighborhood called the People's World. And at that time, you know, a number of us became very interested. And some of the people in our neighborhood went on to get involved later in the Black Panther Party, in various unions, and also helped start the whole Chicano movement in California. And so there was really a connection between the union organizing in LA at that time, which was not a very good city to organize in those days, and the community organizing that was going on. And then, you know, we heard about the effort in Mississippi with COFO and so on, and we're very inspired by that. And when the students came to from all over into Mississippi, it was a big inspiration. So in 1965, the grape strike started, and Caesar, he was with CSO when I first met him, he asked a number of us who had been close to the building of the union if we could take some time off and help with the strike, because we had close to 4,000 people on the picket lines at that time, and it was almost unmanageable. So I got a leave from the hospital and I never went back, and I stayed with the union for 10 years after that. But one of the things that Sanchione was talking about is the community organizing. In the first 5 or 6 months of the strike, we all thought we were going to win the strike because we had so many workers out. And of course, they got many workers in across the picket lines. And if you saw the movie the Cesar Chavez movie, which for somebody that is not really acquainted with the union, it's a good introduction to what we're doing. For those of us that are involved, we have some serious criticisms of that movie, and that's another subject. But one of the things that we did, one of the things that was brought to us from Mississippi was the idea of the boycott.
Speaking to the mic.
The idea of the boycott. And so for the next 5 years, we tried all kinds of different things to persuade people not to buy grapes, because these are grape workers that were out on strike. And farm worker families, hundreds of them, and volunteers and organizers went out across the country, and we had a hell of an organization. And I remember meeting Larry up in Ohio in, '68, when he was a reporter for the Dayton Daily News. And we had taken, I think, 5 farm worker families into Ohio to tell their story as workers tell their story in the churches, you know, in the community. And over a period of time, we got to the point, and it's a long story with a lot of struggle, lots of arrests and all of that. But by 1970, we got the growers to the bargaining table, and they signed the first significant union contract because of the combination of the greater community of the United States and beyond. Sweden and England and other countries refused to unload grapes. You know, the unions in Sweden refused to allow the grapes into Sweden when they were shipped over there. There's lots of other things that happened, but a whole combination of people coming together who listened to what the workers had gone through as farm workers really brought the growers to the bargaining table at that time. And the union actually was the first organization to raise the question of pesticide poisoning on food. And we used that in the boycott because workers were poisoned. You had communities, and to this day, up and down the San Joaquin Valley in South Texas and so on, where you have cancer clusters because of the pesticide poison that goes on the food that we all eat, you know, that are in the field. So there was self-interest on the part of the people in the community, wanting to support farm workers, but the other, you know, they were concerned about the pesticide on the grapes, and of course there's pesticide on everything. And that continued on as workers in the lettuce industry in Salinas and other places began organizing, and those issues really caught the attention of the country over the years. And I think that was very important. Later, we were organizing healthcare. I went back to organizing healthcare workers in South Carolina, and again, the kind of combination that Sanchione and also Sarah was talking about in the community, help workers in South Carolina, New Mexico, and other places to build unions. And then later, we started organizing state workers in Texas, and again, you had a link between what state workers did as people providing services and people who received the services were interested in those, became interested in those workers. And we took that model into Mississippi. And when the workers started 25 years ago to organize state employees, we joined together with the Human Services Coalition and other groups, Mississippi Worker Center and others in the community to encourage and support workers throughout Mississippi to organize. And later, we started organizing casino workers into the Union Unite here in Tunica and on the Gulf Coast. People, there's 5,000 new union members, mainly led by women of color. And there's a campaign in New Orleans now with that same union. But out of that came the Mississippi Immigrants' Rights Alliance. And some of the people around here, Sanchione and others, were part of the founding of the organization because we felt that, one, that we had to connect the greater immigrant community, which is principally Latinos in Mississippi, together with the African American struggle. So our organization is made up of union people, of course, but half of our board is Latino, immigrant, or native born, or African American immigrant or native born. And the president of the Immigrant Rights Alliance is an African American union organizer named Jim Evans, which some of us know real well and worked with over the years. And so together, we have pulled together a coalition in Mississippi that has resulted in the defeat of over 260 anti-immigrant bills like 1070 and 1060 in Arizona and House Bill 56 in Alabama and the other states throughout the South, because we have a situation where white supremacists are in their last stand, and that's clearly demonstrated by what has happened in Mississippi with the battle between Chris McDaniel, who was the leader of all the anti-immigrant proposals in the Mississippi Senate, and Thad Cochran, who to me is not a moderate, but anyway, that demonstrates, you know, what's going on, and I've been doing this for 50 years, and it's hard to do it in 10 minutes. So,
Okay, thank you.
all right.
Our final speaker, last but not least by any means, is Mr. William Lucy. Mr. Lucy is the former treasurer of the Coalition of Black Trade Unions and the former secretary-treasurer of AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees.
Let me, as the entire panel, thank whoever organized this and gave us an opportunity to talk with you for a few moments. I want to share a story with you that goes back a few years, but it talks about the courage of some 1,300 men to defy a system and organize an organization to pursue their interests. But before I do that, I notice a number of young people in here, and let me just make the point, because we may not be clear on what the role of unions are and why they ought to be concerned and committed to helping to build trade unions. Whoever dictates your wages and your benefits also dictates your future. Because if you're unable to earn a decent wage with decent benefits, you're destined to a lifestyle that leaves us constantly struggling. Part of labor's role and responsibility is to deal with that phenomenon. And as we look at what's happening to us now, there was a young fellow who raised a question in a session yesterday, what can we do? Well, we can join the movement of people who are already struggling for a better life. Across this country, low-wage workers are demonstrating their concern for building an organization to represent their interests, whether it's fast food workers, restaurant workers, hotel workers, you name it, poultry workers. All of these jobs are low-wage jobs designed for low-wage earners. The role of organized labor partly is to intervene on that process and help people earn a better way of life and gain a better way of life. So as we talk about how we have built unions, I want to make the argument that workers build unions, not unions. Workers build unions because workers recognize the dilemma that they have. Working people are never paid what they are worth.
That's right.
They are paid what they are forced to accept. And at a point in time, they will defy that principle and organize themselves for a better way of life. And the elders among us, and I consider myself one of them, we have learned that working people have been conditioned. They have been conditioned to suffer collectively and struggle individually. And as a result, we have this ongoing dilemma of how do I improve my station in life. In Memphis, Tennessee, in 1968, 1,300 sanitation workers decided that they had had enough of a system that robbed them of their manhood, that stole their youth, that paid them substantially less than they could live on, and forced them to work almost in a posture of servitude. When they decided they had had enough, then organized labor came to help. And I emphasize when they decided they had had enough. We're going through that same phenomenon now. Workers across this nation, low-wage workers, as I said earlier, have decided they have had enough of working every single day and still cannot meet the basic necessities of life. Hospital workers, nursing home workers, school workers. So our job as trade unionists is to bring whatever technical support and skills we can bring to help them organize their union. And I say help them organize their union because we can't do it when we fly in on a plane, get in a rental car, come to the job site, make a speech, and leave. The work has to be done where the workers are, and they have to be committed to the process of building their own union. Now, in my opinion, how these things tie together, union organizing and community organizing, if the community had not come to our aid in Memphis, Tennessee, we'd still be on strike. Without the community, we cannot build the kind of mechanisms we need. Now, the community's responsibility is to help create the climate for organizing. I mean, we have institutions in the poor community, church, small business, large business, everything you can think of. We have got to go out and make a case with that constituency to help us create a climate where workers, when they organize, they can use the power that comes through organization. Right now, as low-wage workers describe what they want based on their own assessment of their need, better wages, better conditions, but at the bottom of that, it's the ability to form a union and collectively bargain with their employers. All the rest of it is pure and simple talk. If we do not have the ability to organize and bargain, workers will still be subjugated to the whims of the employer. We've got to change the paradigm. We've got to create a climate for organizing. Then across the community, we've got to make organizing struggles a battle not between the union and the employer, but a battle between the employer and the community. Because at the end of the day, as workers' wages improve, life in the community improves. You can tell a low-wage neighborhood when you drive by it. Not because people choose for it to look like that, they simply can improve the conditions around through which they live. So my argument today is not to just get mired down in history, but what do we do as a broad community to help people who need organizational support to do that? We are now working with the poultry industry. That's the most powerful industry in this state is the poultry industry. Yet poultry workers are exposed to abuse like you have never seen before. And we as a trade union movement got to come to the aid of workers in those kinds of situations. There are some here today, I'm not sure where you all sit and stand up. Those who are from the Coalition of Poultry Workers, please stand up. These workers work under some of the most difficult situations, exposed to carpal tunnel syndrome, all kinds of injuries that you are exposed to as a result of the nature of the work. Right now, our government is supporting a line speed change. Right. These workers must handle 145 birds per minute. Wow. The government wants to raise that to 175 birds per minute. This is a natural role for a trade union. And not wait until they win their fight to come in with your authorization cards, but right now when they need to help. The Coalition of Black Trade Unions have been working with them, and we've jacked up President Obama for the last year or so that he does not move this legislation at the expense of these workers. That just seems to me to be the role of the union, to help when folks need help, not after they've won the fight. Secondly, we've got to give these folks the ability to build roots in the communities from which they come, so that when other workers like them need help, the community is conditioned to give them the help that they need. This is not a us and them. The battle for workers today is clearly a us and them issue, because the wealthy and powerful dictates the nature of the lives of people who are struggling for a living. So my argument with this panel and other panels like it is, let us share our skills and our commitments and our time and talent with folks who are working to build a movement right where they're at. We should not waste a whole lot of time trying to create individual unions. Let's create a movement within organized labor that will fight for the needs of workers that we're talking about. And hopefully when we get down to the discussion, we can raise some questions so we can talk some specifics.
Just a point of personal privilege as a chair, for anybody who wants to see an amazing video about the struggle that Brother Lucy was talking about, get the video At the River I Stand. It's a video that describes a strike, the strike that he was referring to, but also the relationship between community organizing and labor organizing, one of the most successful ventures in the civil rights movement, in my estimation. Okay, the next portion will be to ask if any of the panelists want to comment on what other panelists had to say.
Yeah.
Questions? Okay. Not here. Yes,
Okay.
please.
I wanted to add also that I think you were saying that when you were in Mississippi, there were only black folks and white folks here.
For the most part.
And when I came up here from Texas, is there something wrong with it? Maybe it's not even on. Is it on?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, one of the things, when I came up here from Texas, I grew up mostly in the Southwest, but I've organized all over the South. But this was the first time I came to a state where I couldn't hear people speaking Spanish or buy tortillas or find restaurants. In the whole state, when we were organizing state workers, I went to every county in the state because state employees are in every county. and I found 2 Mexican restaurants and 5 Chinese restaurants in 1989. But what happened after the North American Free Trade Agreement in 1994, people were pushed off their land in southern Mexico and other places because of the North American Free Trade Agreement eliminating the tariffs that protected the agricultural industry in Mexico, which was primarily co-ops and ejidos and collective farms that people had had literally for centuries. And there's been a struggle over that for centuries as well. But what happened was that because the United States was able to market corn at below market rates in Mexico, you know, from Conagra and other companies like that, which subsidized U.S. corn, they undercut the prices that the local farmers would get. And so suddenly in the Deep South, we had a surge of people primarily from southern Mexico at first that came into the South, into the poultry plants that Bill was talking about, and into Catfish also, where Sarah worked, and a number of other places here in Mississippi. When the casinos were legalized and they began building the casinos on the coast in 1992, workers came from Florida and from Texas and other places who were primarily undocumented to build those casinos. Well, when the casinos were established and they had the hotels and stuff, they began hiring workers. One, you had a lot, probably 2/3 of the people working in the casinos were U.S.-born citizens or people that were here legally with work permits and so on. And then another fraction of them were guest workers, primarily from Mexico, Peru, and from Jamaica. And then you had what you called contract workers that were essentially overstays that were hired by contractors that the casinos would get to provide a buffer between them and the undocumented workers, because when you were overstay, you lost your so-called legalization. And so when we started organizing the casino workers in 1999, we began doing home visits and quiet meetings and so on in Tunica and in Biloxi and Gulfport. We found that a lot of the workers that were like us in this room were upset about how the contract workers, as they called them, were being treated. And so almost immediately after that, there was a group of, when we had a union meeting, a house meeting, after that, workers came to us and told us that a bunch of workers had been arrested. And what happened was that those overstays had stood up to the contractor about the conditions and the wages, and he conceded everything to them, and the next day he called the Gulfport police and the Border Patrol in Long Beach and had all these workers arrested and deported. And at that time, none of us knew anything about what to do when immigrants are arrested. And so we had a hard time trying to find them and notify their families. And as a result of that, and a result of concern from the religious community about the refusal of school districts, including the Jackson Public School District, to enroll undocumented children in elementary and high school, then we came together and we formed MIRA. And MIRA is an organization made up of union and community and religious. A lot of our membership are the old SCLC people from some years back. Stancioni's on the board, Jaribo's on our board as well, and we have had a lot of activity. One of the things when you're talking about poultry workers, when Local 1529 had a neutrality agreement at a plant in Scott County, 2 counties east of here, they had nobody who could speak Spanish. Most of the food processing workers in Mississippi were unions they organized unions that were led by African-American workers. They didn't speak Spanish, and the poultry processors thought they would be cute by bringing in Latinos from Florida and try to break the union. Well, luckily we had people that were bilingual, and when they had a two-week access period, And we sent in our folks, they talked to the Latinos, and 100% of the Latino poultry workers in that campaign joined the union. Together with African Americans, they were able to go to the bargaining table and get a contract that improved mainly their working conditions. So that was one of the first things that we did as an organization. And I think it's a demonstration of the need for a real symbiotic relationship between the greater community and workers that are struggling.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments? We must, okay, we're going to open it up to the floor. There's a microphone over there. Please line up by the microphone if you have a comment or a question. No, you really need to talk to the microphone, please, because they can't hear you.
Camera.
And please say your name and where you're from.
Hello everybody. My name is Henry Jones, and I'm from a small town in Mississippi called Clarksdale, Mississippi. And I guess I have two questions that I want to ask. So, coming from a place like Clarksdale,
Speak to the mic.
I'm sorry about that. I gripped the mic for y'all there. But coming from a small town like Clarksdale, Mississippi, education has gave me the opportunity to do a lot of things in life. And so one of the things that I did was I was able to go to the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and I studied labor union. So I did labor history. So it was a master's program. And I guess one of the questions behind it, and now I'm currently working on my doctorate degree, and I wanted to look at organizing for political accountability. And so I guess the question would be, how important do you think it is for labor unions and community organizations to connect to academics? Because education happens through academics. And sorry, I'm getting a little nervous, but education happens through academics. And I'm about to start my dissertation. And when you look at movement building, you always find just stuff about the movement, but not about how they built the movement. So not tactics. And so if people understood the tactics and the strategies, then they could understand how to support labor unions and community organizations. So I want to know, how important do you all think it is? And then specifically to the sister right here, I want to know what is the UAW doing as far as academic wise to get support from universities or whatever, to like do scholarly articles around it, or to do mobilization pieces on how to educate people, like how to take action around different things or whatever. So
Thank you,
that's
brother.
pretty much it.
Glad you asked that question. We have been doing some things on a lot of college campuses. I have my GOI coordinator back in the room, Miss Carissa Field. Carissa, if you could I hate to dismiss a young person who's she's doing the work on college campuses. So if she can come up, if she wasn't here, I would speak on what the youth movement is, but I'd like for her to just give a couple of
And then
key points.
I wanted to make sure you understood. So I was asking from a scholarly perspective. So when you're looking at work like dissertation work, they want you to have like scholarly articles. And so if you look up a lot of things on movement building, you will find pieces talking about the sanitary strike, but then you won't find pieces that's talking about what are the tactics that led up to the actions to build the movement in the sanitary work. So like, I wanted to speak like specifically on like scholarly work versus like, I guess like engagement work.
So, yes, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
There are a few excellent books. One of the ones that I like the best is called Black Workers Remembered.
Yeah, you have to speak to the mic. You have to go up to the microphone. Okay. Okay. Anybody else want to speak? Other questions? Or you want to
Anybody
comment?
have any answers, I guess? Or was that a hard one?
No,
Well, all right, let me say,
it's thought provoking.
yeah.
No, I can stand here at the mic with you and tell you that there are some writings that I think are not authentic, but there are some that I found to be authentic. You got to be careful about academia because it's just that. And a lot of times it's controlled by the same power structure that locks Black workers out of programs and opportunities. But I did read the book Black Workers Remembered by Michael Honey, and he does a decent job of describing the Memphis movement, but he also dovetails that movement and crisscrosses back and forth. It talks about all of the movements that were happening at that time in Memphis, including the Firestone plant work, the furniture workers. He lifts up great people like Ida Leachman, who was president of one of the locals of the Furniture Workers Union. And we were privileged during our Memphis conference a few years ago for the Southern Human Rights Organizers Conference, where we honored Mr. Lucy, and we had 2 of the sanitation workers who came and spoke at that conference, 2 of the last ones who were still living. And so that's one book, and there are a number of other references, and if you come by and I take your information down, I'll be happy to share the social justice book list that we have, particularly around worker history.
And I also just kind of wanted to say to you, young man, as far as the movement building, speaking on my own personal perspective and experience, it's something that is organically grown and done. I mean, there are some things that talk about what happened back in the 60s, and this is why we're here talking about the movement, but organizing workers today, it is important that we engage and get involved in our communities. And deal with our churches and a lot of 501c3 groups that are really doing some grassroots work and really are about the business of the people.
Yes, ma'am.
It can happen. And we just have to, people are so, they're in their own little space and they don't take the time to care about important issues that really affect the people. And we have to get back to what was happening in the 60s. Everybody cared about their neighbor. And that's what's going to make the difference in making the changes that labor wants to see and the people as a whole need to see.
Yeah, and I guess it came from, I didn't understand, like, why hasn't there been a push on academics? And so I didn't know what a labor union was until I went to Tennessee State. And so I think that there's poor that we don't have labor education, even in elementary school. And so if kids were receptive to what is a union in grade school, then they would know how to support it in college. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I guess that was the point that I was kind of making, like, how important do you think it would be a push to even include labor union in, like, elementary schools or high schools?
Some of our, I do know the UAW does a lot of lobbying, and we are involved in some key legislation, and we are looking at things we can do to kind of try to look at putting labor back into some of the schools. So it is important. It does need to start from the elementary level on up versus you in college and then you're trying to figure out what it all means. So whenever you need to get in line and talk about the program.
Let me just make one observation. We have a responsibility ourselves to speak to the institutions in our community, to have them talk about the issue of workers' rights, worker education, where we have political power and influence at school board level. We ought to be demanding that labor education be a part of the curriculum so that people can learn from whatever grade up that the role of workers in our economy and our society is a critical role. The Chamber of Commerce makes sure we know about businesses' role. We should be arguing for the same role, but absent the school system, we ought to be teaching it in our social clubs and our churches so that people understand that there's a valuable role that has been played and will be played in the future. Let me just make this last point. People decide right now what kind of future we're going to have by the wage levels they decide they're going to pay. In all of these, what I call poverty industries, people have decided what they're going to pay, and therefore they dictate who's going to work there. The jobs that Ms. Sarah spoke about and what have you, the predominant jobs are African American and Latino, because they figure these folks are not unionized, and therefore they will work for the wages that are paid. And our communities, in return, have to take interest in the well-being of workers in those concerns, because as Bill said, if we improve our wages and our working conditions, we're going to have more stable neighborhoods and more stable communities and economies, and you will see the changes that gives our young folks a better life.
Yes, sir.
It's critically important. I agree with you.
I'd like to use the prerogative of the chair to say something to you also, brother. First of all, as far as books, there are many books. I'm glad that Sister Jarabu is going to help you with them. There's a book called Organized Labor and the Black Worker by Philip Foner. There are many books, but the question is not so much, is there scholarship out there? Why don't poor and working people have access to this information? For the same reason that The newspaper that I read in Louisville, Kentucky has a business section, but no labor section. If you want to find out information about business, about labor, you look in the business section. I would dare say every major newspaper in the United States is like that. You don't get the information. It is there. It is there. I teach part-time at a university, and I can tell you that my students, God love them, don't know the first thing about organized labor. And this is not an aberration or a misordering of priorities. The way these companies make their money is by dividing us and keeping us ignorant. They divide whites against black, and women against men, and young against old, and straight against gay, and able-bodied so-called against disabled, and they make money off us. And we sometimes have bit that apple. We've bitten that apple. And until such point as we get the consciousness to say, this is not a mistake. They planned this. They planned to screw us. Unless we figure out a way to deal with it. Now, you're a PhD student. I respect that. But what you learn in school too much is BS, MS, and PhD. Bullshit, more shit, and piled higher and deeper.
It's real.
And the fact is, I know how to use the polysyllabic sesquipedalian words with the proper syntax and morphology, but I also learn how to talk about people's mamas. And in order to do this, there needs to be a class understanding that this is, again, is not an aberration, that these people make money by dividing us and by humiliating us. And until such point as we understand the nature, the intrinsic nature of work, who do you think got us the 8-hour day? It was labor. And then we slacked off. And so what they did was they forced overtime on us and pay some workers time and a half, and other people don't get them. My grandmother came to the United States around 1905, and she was a garment worker. And there was a sign in the garment factory, if you don't come in on Sunday, don't come in on Monday. She worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the fight is long. And if I may suggest to you, because you have the tools if you're a PhD student, you find these tools out and then ask yourself, why didn't they teach you this before?
Yes, sir.
I would like the
Say your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Larry Rubin. I'd like the panel to speak to the following. In too many cases, union members don't identify with the union. They just, they see the union as something you give dues to, and at best, if they understand it, you get a raise, you get better conditions for that. It's the vending machine kind of mentality. In too many cases, when we help workers organize, we replicate that mentality because we treat them just as workers in the plant. All we talk about is collective bargaining. We don't think of them as churchgoers, bowlers, and so forth. I think this issue is what defeated the Volkswagen campaign. So my question is, how do we break through this? And that's supposed to be the fundamental question of this panel, union organizing and community organizing.
Somebody want to speak to that?
Let me take a swing. I don't care where you start, whether it's in our community or the well-to-do community, the well-to-do community, people have virtually no understanding of the role of organized labor. And it's worse today than it was years and years ago. At a point in time in our history, the trade union movement was an integral part of the community. We did everything, from the religious roles to the recreation roles to the family support roles. We did it all. And I think as Ira says, the workload got too heavy and we started to drop back on things that we engaged in to the point where right now we're probably engaged in very little. I mean, and I know this sounds trite, but the softballs, the baseballs, the basketball team, the recreational activities that trade unions sponsor, we don't do that anymore. We now got to find another way to relate to the well-being of workers. And we need to spend our time building relationships with the institutions of our communities. Not the old stuff show up on Sunday before the Tuesday election, but how to get them intimately involved in the life of the institutions in our community, and thereby reach out to the families and to the workers. We had Reverend Jeremiah Wright out of Chicago one Sunday morning raised the question with his congregation, how many people there were parts of unions. 90% of the congregation stood up, but he didn't know it. He had no idea the role that his membership was playing in trade unions. We've got to get back to that same role here. I think organized labor to a great degree has corrupted the relationship between community leaders and itself. And we need to get back to the point where our word means something. We need not just ask the church to help us when we're in trouble. And the question is, where are we when the church is in trouble?
Right.
And it's those kinds of relationships that I think we need to start building. That way we've got credibility when we go down to talk to the powers that be, and that's across the black community, brown community, no matter what. Right now, we are on our own. That's why we represent 12% of the workforce. And if we're going to represent more, we've got to figure out what kind of movement do we want to be. Organized labor ought to be the core of a new social justice movement to help and not only preserve the rights we've won in the 60s, but to build economic rights that we can deal with for coming. And we need to recognize one thing, and that's deal with facts that there are no new high-paying jobs coming to our community. The jobs that are here are low-paying, no-benefit, dead end. And that ought to be a golden opportunity for organized labor, because our history is taking bad jobs and making them better. I mean, 44% of the jobs that exist now are poverty jobs, and they belong to black and brown workers. So if we're going to improve their lifestyle, we've got to take those bad jobs and make them better. And only labor can do that.
I just wanted to speak to Larry's question about workers don't identify with the union. One of the things that we're trying to do, I'm not saying that everything that the UAW do is different or whatever, but me being the lead organizer, one of the focuses that I am trying to put to get workers to see that they are the union. It's not me and it's not the international. And getting them engaged right now on a level to where when you're building leaders, not only are we building the leaders that's going to run that local union, but we're building leaders that are going to go back into their communities, into their churches and social groups and lead. They're being trained to lead. And when you look at what's different about our campaign, I'm not the one that's out speaking to the media about what's happening with the campaign. I mean, I'm very privileged to be allowed to speak on the panel, but normally we would send a worker to be a part of the panel. Our workers that are on our campaign are in the media. They do the newspaper interviews, TV interviews. Again, we're training leaders. So I think that they are the Nissan people. There's 3,000 to 4,000 people out there. They are starting to get that they're going to be the ones. It's their union. It's going to be what they have it to be, and they understand that they have to be, in order for it to be successful, they're going to have to be very involved in it. So I just kind of wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I would like to support what Santiana is talking about. In all the years I've been organizing, I've observed a couple models. One is where a union has a lot of organizers and they fly them in and they do all the things that need to be done to win a union representation election or whatever. And that leads to dependency on the union staff when the union staff or the organizers do all the work. And I saw that in Las Vegas some years ago with a campaign at a major hospital there where the union had won access to the hospital premises for organizers through a campaign. They got a neutrality agreement and they did that. And so rather than having workers that were involved in a real organizing committee. They place staff people on each of the floors of the hospital in the break rooms to wait for workers to come in. And they did win the election. And again, Nevada, Las Vegas, is a right-to-work state, but they won with about 50 or 60% of the vote in a American Arbitration Association sponsored election. When they went to the bargain with the contract, they couldn't hardly get any workers involved. And then when they got the contract, it took them several years to get a majority of people signed up on cards. And to me, that was the wrong way of organizing. I've organized in nothing but right-to-work states. In South Carolina, for example, we had a group of workers in Sumter, mainly black women that were leading the union, and they built the union inside. We didn't have to go in the hospital. In fact, we didn't bring, and this is one of the campaigns where we didn't do house meetings, because those workers would bring people from their departments out to union meetings and make sure that they're bringing. They chartered out. We didn't have to get the list from the boss of who worked there. We knew better than the boss who worked there. They were active. And I remember one time they put out a leaflet with a little blue dot on it saying, with a red dot on it that said, when this dot turns blue, the union promises will come true. Well, they took red dots that they bought at all the office stores and decorated the entire hospital with red dots everywhere. And that shut up the boss, and that built solidarity, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. And we won the election. We had a strong bargaining committee with representation from every floor, and they got the contract that they wanted. And there's a big difference. If you look at Las Vegas, the Culinary Workers Local 280 there has about 60,000 union members from the casinos that are on the Strip and in other places. And when I was there, they stayed on the streets. There was actions of one kind or another supporting workers at one place or another all the time. And they have close to 100% union membership in those casinos because of union activity, because workers see the union as an instrument for struggle, not as a social service agency, and that's a very important thing. And because of their activity, they have a strong immigrant rights movement in Las Vegas. Because so many workers are immigrants, they have had a strong civil rights movement there in North Las Vegas and so on. And that kind of activity is what we need to have in the union. Workers really do have to see that organization as an instrument of struggle with the boss, with the corporations. Because if we go from contract to contract, and a 2 or 3 or 4 year contract, and we don't do anything in between except grievances, we're not a real union.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, next questioner. Say your name, please.
My name's Anne. I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm a registered nurse, and I noticed a lot of the theme from Sister White here and all your stories about building the unions is the working conditions before the union came in are just blatantly terrible. And that no person should have to go through. But what about the new normal, which is conditions that are just maintenance level, but as in they're the basic. You get benefits, you have an okay wage, but you have none of the safeguards protecting you. Your employer can still fire you. I guess the question is, how do we convince people how do we let people know that they need a union before they realize they need a union, as in before the conditions, decline. In Pittsburgh, we have a big fight. We have UPMC and we have Highmark. And I happen to work at one of the last few independent hospitals within the city limits. And the conditions are good there, but that's only because they've had the funding from the community to keep it that way. So I don't know that anybody at that hospital would be aware that, there could ever be a situation where they would need a union. So how do we let them know?
Okay, so we'll answer you in a moment. We're going to get all the questions. Next person, please say your name. Speak into the mic.
I am Daniel from North Carolina, and I'm a community organizer. So this question kind of is going to relate to both organizing and labor. I am a member of the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, and we work with communities that have been affected by the discrimination that is being put by the hog operation, CAFOs, poultry. And I've been doing a lot of organizing very, very, very secluded communities, and I have no problem with the African American communities. You know, I knock on the door, 30 seconds, I'm done. They give me all their information. You know, they're really aware of the problems in the community. They know they've been abused, and they're willing to collaborate. With Hispanics is a whole different story, and I'm gonna give a background. Okay, so we come from a very from a different culture that have suffered abuse since the Spaniard conquistador, and we've suffered abuse now in our countries because of democracy has been tainted by American imperialism and different European fingling of the area, and our view of normal living in Central America and Mexico is very different from what you guys think that just a normal living is. So we come here seeking that American dream, and we become conformists. We're like, oh, whoa, we're getting paid $7.25 cents an hour. Whoa, this is great. Like I'm probably gonna die of some chemical that I'm working on, especially in the CAFOs. So I want to know what strategy can I use to organize the Latinos, because it's very, very difficult, and it's not a lot of people bring the Chavez movement and other movements back in the day, but you also have to realize back then it was very different from now in the sense that, back then there was more open discrimination, but now it's not that open discrimination, it's the legal discrimination, the legal hindering of our freedom.
Okay, we've got your point.
Okay,
you.
cool.
Next.
Thank you. My name is Colette Tippie. I'm an organizer in New Orleans at the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice, and I just want to commend the panel today. Thank you very much for all the work that you've been doing. I think it's an honor to be here. I think that there's been some really good discussion today about the role of unions, the role of labor organizing within worker centers, and I think that making sure that we have in all of our organizing the transformative relationships that help to build out leaders is key. And so I just wanted to highlight that. I think that the way that you're describing the UAW campaign on the ground right now is important. And I think that especially in the South, it's the only way that we're ever going to be able to see real change. So I just wanted to ask people to expound on that even more and talk about the differences that you've seen when you've done it in different ways, when you've been transformative versus transactional.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is LaShonda Bobbitt, and I am the director for the Coalition of Poultry Workers. We work with poultry workers all over to discuss the different issues that they face on a daily basis. And I've just really stood to thank Mr. Lucy for his help in the CBTU for helping our organization. I've been to Washington on 2 occasions, speaking on behalf of the workers and the different issues that they face and all the things that they go up against. And basically, her question was a good question about, the unions. So that's basically where my question is coming from, too.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brittany Gray, and I've done community, political, and labor organizing, not to the extent of you all on the panel, but to some extent. I have 2 questions. One is specifically for Ms. Butler in the organizing that's going on in the Nissan plant.
Can you hear her? No.
I'm from Greenwood, Mississippi, but I live in Atlanta. But specifically, the organizing piece is going on at the Nissan plant. Just wanted to know a little bit I don't like the word train because I think you train dogs. So about the development of leaders within the plant and could you provide specific examples as to what they are doing in their communities outside of the plant and how they are possibly leading within the plant? Because I have a classmate that works there, and as an organizer, you mention all different types of campaigns and talking to different people, and I've mentioned it to him, and he was a little bit, what is a union? How does this work? What would this do? So I think, everyone is going to have to talk to everyone about the campaign, but I mean, we all need to be well versed about that. The second piece is, in a national political campaign that I worked on, we used the REI model, which is respect, empower, and include. So I think that in a lot of labor organizing, some of those components are missing, in forms of empowerment. And I just wanted your take on that because specifically when we talk about low wage campaigns, I'm wondering if our messaging is getting a little mixed. I know
Hold it. I'm still mean to be rude, but we only have 5 minutes
Okay,
left.
I'm sorry, but I had a conflict
we got
because,
your
I was wondering with the messaging, how do you empower them? And then you say that, you're fighting for $15. I see that as being also allowing the workers to be complacent and not seeking.
Thank you.
future.
Please, next.
I'm Emily Lipple Cheney. I'm in Minneapolis. I identify as a cooperative organizer. I help other young people start businesses that they own. And so for me, what's at the intersection of labor and community organizing is very much the cooperative model. I think what's too bad in the US is that the history of cooperation has been erased in many ways or edited. For example, the history of cooperatives in the US is of poor people and of people who are historically marginalized. So as a book recommendation for folks, Jessica Gordon Nembhard just authored a book called Collective Courage, which talks about the role of cooperatives in the civil rights movement. I highly recommend it, even though I haven't read it yet. It's on the way. Because Ella Baker was the leader of the Young Negroes Cooperative League, and cooperatives were the economic tools that were used in the civil rights movement. And so my question to the panel, or kind of the topic or what have you, is for me, I guess, I don't see organized labor as the end. I see it as a means to an end.
I've got to stop you because we don't have no time to answer.
Okay.
I've got your point. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I don't mean to be rude. Yes, I do.
Well, very quickly, I'm Teresa Elamine, but I'm rising to mention Colette Tippie, who was up here at the mic and asked about worker centers. But the truth is she's been dug in New Orleans with a worker center for racial justice since Katrina. And so she didn't mention that. And I was saying when I was sitting next to her that she should come up here and mention that because this whole labor community organizing is really about worker centers and social movement organizing. And so we have to be always putting that together, so the unions don't think they do a 911 call and then Jobs with Justice shows up with signs. And that has been part of the fundamental problem. And so I'm so glad to be able to be with you tomorrow at the Nissan plant. I'll be there with my sign.
All right. Okay, we've got 3 minutes. Who wants to respond? Anybody want to respond to any of these questions? Oh, one more. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there. Please.
That's okay. I don't have a question.
What's your name?
My name is Carissa Fields. I'm with the UAW. I live in Detroit, Michigan. I didn't have a question. I work with Sanchione Butler, but I just wanted to address there are young people out there that are trying to raise awareness and educate others on their campuses and the community about the importance of workers' rights. We understand that young people may give off the idea that they don't understand what's going on. Please don't forget that this is a generation where people are going to school and they're working 2 jobs. They are working minimum wage. These are the young people who are coming out of college with a lot of debt that are forced to work minimum wage jobs or temporary labor jobs. But if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what we're doing with the UAW in terms of youth organizing and raising awareness and getting young people to care about Nissan workers, as there's rally flyer on your chair, please come to the back. So that's all I wanted to say.
We are just about out of time. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, we don't have time because of questions, so many questions. I want to, I want to thank this distinguished panel for the very in-depth presentations that they made, and I want to thank the questioners for the in-depth questions that they gave. There are many more things to be said. We'll be here for a little while if you want to talk with us, because we would like to answer your questions. We just have run out of time. So thank you very much.